Welcome back, everyone, to Evidence Law 1, Module 1, Lesson 2. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer as we continue our journey. Now, this is a very natural progression from Lesson 1. If you recall, in our last session, we established exactly what evidence is, the philosophy behind it, and most importantly, we established that evidence law is inherently procedural in nature. Well, today, we're going to go much deeper. We are looking at the full architecture of justice by exploring the actual classification of law. Specifically, we really need to clearly distinguish between substantive law and adjectival law. So, grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's dive right into the architecture of justice. Okay, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. Number 1, the Kampala goat theft. Number 2, what is substantive law? Number 3, what is adjectival law? Number 4, the house and the road. Number 5, where evidence law fits. And finally, number 6, a final discussion.
Section 1, the Kampala goat theft, a practical scenario.
I want you to picture this. Imagine two neighbors in Kampala. One morning, one neighbor wakes up, accuses the other of stealing his goats, and literally marches right to the magistrate's court for justice. Now, two immediate questions arise from this. The first is stealing goats actually a legal wrong? And the second is, how does the court actually prove who took the goat? I mean, what evidence will it accept? Who gets to testify? These two distinct questions represent the two massive branches of the law that we're studying today. The first deals with defining the crime itself, while the second deals entirely with the machinery of how the court determines what actually happened in reality.
Moving on to Section 2, what is substantive law? What is the law?
All right, get your pens ready because this is a foundational definition for your notes. Substantive law is the body of law that defines legal rights, duties, and obligations. Essentially, it answers the fundamental question, what is the law? It tells us exactly what the rules of the game are in our society, and crucially, what consequences follow when someone breaks them, or, when behavior falls short of the required standard. Let's ground this right here in our jurisdiction with some prime examples of substantive law in Uganda. I'll go slowly so you can get these down. First, the Penal Code Act Cap 128. This defines criminal offenses like murder, rape, fraud, and yes, this is the exact law that makes our Kampala goat theft a crime and prescribes the punishment for it. Next, we have the Contracts Act Cap 284, which defines what makes a valid contract and what constitutes a breach. Then, the Land Act Cap 236, defining land tenure and rights of occupancy. And finally, the Succession Act Cap 268, which dictates how an estate is distributed. Do you notice a pattern here? In every single case, the statute tells us what the law requires or prohibits. It does not tell us how to prove it in a courtroom.
Section 3. What is adjectival law? How is the law enforced?
So, how does the magistrate's court actually go about proving who took that goat? Well, that brings us to adjectival law. You'll also commonly hear this called procedural law. This is the body of law that governs exactly how legal rights and obligations are enforced in court. Let me be absolutely clear about this. Adjectival law does not create rights. It does not define offenses. Instead, it sets out the machinery through which substantive law is actually applied in real, messy disputes. It answers the specific question, how is the law enforced?
Just as we did before, let's look at the primary authorities in Uganda. Please make sure you list these procedural statutes in your notes as well. First, the primary focus for our entire course, the Evidence Act Cap 8. This governs how facts are proved, what evidence is admissible, and who can testify. Then we have the Civil Procedure Act Cap 282, which governs how civil cases are conducted. Next is the Trial on Indictments Act Cap 25, governing those serious criminal trials in the High Court. And finally, the Magistrates Courts Act Cap 19, governing proceedings in the courts that handle the vast majority of our everyday cases. Remember, these dictate the court process. They do not decide what is inherently right or wrong.
Which brings us to Section 4, the house and the road, a helpful metaphor.
I want you to think about it exactly like this. Substantive law, it builds the house. It establishes that solid structure, creating the rights, the duties, and the obligations you have as a citizen. Adjective law, on the other hand, builds the road that leads right up to the house. It provides the necessary pathway for enforcing those rights when they're actually disputed. You simply cannot have a legal wrong addressed without the substantive law creating the house, but you absolutely cannot reliably reach that house or prove that wrong without the adjectival road guiding your way. Neither works without the other. It's a total package.
Let's map this onto a practical civil scenario so you can really see it in action. Suppose a business in Kampala has a valid contract under the Contracts Act Cap 284, and the other party just flat out refuses to pay. Now, the Contracts Act, our substantive house, says this is a breach, but to actually get a remedy, you have to walk down the adjectival road. Step 1, you file a plaint, and that's governed by the Civil Procedure Act, Cap 282. Step 2, you produce the contract as a document in court, which is governed entirely by the Evidence Act, Cap 8. Step 3, you call your witnesses to testify. Step 4, you prove your case on a balance of probabilities. Every single step in that enforcement process is dictated by adjectival machinery.
Section 5. Where evidence law fits. Evidence law classification.
Bringing our focus directly back to the core subject of our time together, evidence law falls squarely 100% within adjectival law. Remember, evidence law tells us absolutely nothing about whether conduct is legal or illegal. It couldn't care less whether stealing a goat is a crime. It only kicks in and governs what happens when that dispute actually reaches the inside of a courtroom. It is the purest form of procedural machinery.
And this brilliantly illustrates why this classification matters practically, especially when you get to an appeal. If you're a lawyer arguing an evidence point before an appellate court, you're not arguing about what the law requires a citizen to do. If an appellate court overturns a trial court's decision because, say, a document was wrongly admitted or a key witness was wrongly excluded, well, that's an error of adjectival law. That is entirely different from a trial judge fundamentally misunderstanding the substantive law of theft or contract. Make sense?
Section 6. The final discussion question. Food for thought.
Okay, before we wrap this explainer up, let's summarize our core authorities so you can double-check the accuracy of your notes. On the substantive side, the what is the law side, we have our Penal Code Act, Cap 128, and Contracts Act, Cap 284. On the adjectival side, the how is it enforced side, we have our Evidence Act, Cap 8, and Civil Procedure Act, Cap 282. Ensure you have these categorized correctly. This distinction is absolutely foundational to everything we're going to do moving forward.
And now, I want to leave you with this final, highly important discussion point. It's a bit of a brain teaser. Let's say a student argues that since evidence law is quote-unquote only procedural, it's somehow less important than substantive criminal law. Do you agree with that? I want you to apply this directly back to our Kampala goat theft scenario. Consider this deeply. Without the adjectival law, without the rules dictating what evidence is actually admissible and exactly how witnesses are examined, how could you ever reliably prove who stole the goat? Think about why adjectival law might actually be more decisive than substantive law in determining final practical outcome of a case in the real world. Discuss this amongst yourselves, and we will pick right up here in our next session. Have a great one.